Welcome. Welcome everybody tonight. Good to see you all. We got a good bunch out, and we are going down the path of all these folks through the view of David, and we're on lesson number 12. If anybody needs a book, we got some extra books up here if anybody would like to have one. And tonight we get to talk about Mephibosheth. And Michael said, just as long as I act like I was saying it correctly, you all wouldn't know the difference. So Mephibosheth it is. So great story, interesting story. One that, it's a little obscure. You don't see it much. You never probably read about it. If you did, you'd probably forgot it. But there's it's pretty interesting account that happens in 2 Samuel chapter 9. If you want to get your Bibles, go to 2 Samuel chapter 9. We'll begin there in just a second. Aaron, Holly, would you lead us in prayer, please?
Heavenly Father, we're so thankful to you for another day that you've blessed us with and the opportunity to come together to study more about your servant David. Please be with us that we might be open and receptive to those things that we can learn about David and his life and the examples that we see from different accounts pertaining to him, so that we might be better servants. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. So looking at Mephibosheth through David's eyes, and the title says that he would have seen David as a gracious king, and we'll be exploring that tonight and see why Mephibosheth would say that about David. And very, very interesting story. One you probably have overlooked, but is there. So I guess we need to try to get a little background on this character. So who is this Mephibosheth? Okay, he is Jonathan's son. And who is Jonathan? Saul's son. So that makes Mephibosheth Saul's grandson. Okay? So that's good. We're doing good. Now here's the next one. Who's Ishbosheth?
Jonathan's older son. What?
Saul's oldest.
Saul's
oldest son. So we got these two. We got to kind of keep them. They get involved in the story, but not so much here. But I think it's interesting that we know that. So Ishbosheth is Saul's son, and Mephibosheth is Saul's grandson. Everybody good there? So tell me something about Ishbosheth that everybody's got on the tip of their tongue. He was a king. So we forget that part of it. He was king of what?
Israel.
He was king of Israel. How long? Not too long. He was king 2 years. He reigned for 2 years. So what we often talk about Saul and David and Solomon, where we live out that little 2-year segment after Saul of this Ishbosheth. And but he certainly was. He is kind of a character during this time. Just said that to try to keep the two separate, so we know that who Mephibosheth is, and we know who Ishbosheth is. So anyway, get those two straight in our heads. So the booklet says, it starts out, justice, mercy, and grace are through the beautiful attributes of God. We can offer technical definitions for these triplets, but the best explanation may be simple. And it has 3 definitions that are very simple. Justice is when we get what we deserve. When we do something wrong, we have to pay the price. We get our justice. Mercy is when we don't get what we deserve. We should have been punished for that, but we weren't. So that's mercy. And grace is what we get when we get what we don't deserve. So mercy, grace, justice are all seen here in the life of David. And with all the other flaws that David has, that we've talked about a bunch of them already, in this particular story, David certainly shows all three of those: justice, mercy, and grace, as he deals with this character, Mephibosheth. So, very interesting, I think, to keep that in mind. What the author's trying to get us to look out here is David, look at David's life and look at some of these really good characteristics that we see here in this chapter in 2 Samuel chapter 9. So, it's pretty, there's not much to it, 13 verses, but somebody want to read 1 through 4 to get us started on what we're talking about here, what's going on?
And David said, "Is there yet any that is left of the house of Saul, that I may show them kindness for Jonathan's sake? And there was the house of Saul, servant whose name was Ziba. And when they had called unto David, the king said unto him, Art thou Ziba? And he said, Thy servant is he. And the king said, Is there not yet any of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God unto him? And Ziba said unto the king, Jonathan hath yet a son, which is lame on his feet. And the king said unto him, Where is he? And Ziba said unto the king, Behold, he is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, in Lodebar.
Lodebar. Very good. So David is. So what is David's mindset here? What's he asking? What's he thinking? What's he wanting to do?
Show kindness and mercy.
Okay, he's wanting to show kindness and mercy to who?
Anyone who is left of the house of Saul.
Anyone who is left of the house of Saul. David says, I want to show kindness to anyone that's left. Is that a normal thing for a reigning monarch to do when he first takes over the reins in this time? What would they normally do? Okay.
So he's going to make every effort to do that because the kingdom's still split. The 10 tribes, the 10 tribes that are left in the north are still following and still believe that Saul's the rightful king and his heirs are rightful heirs. So although there are clearly grace, mercy, all those things, it's a huge issue to unite the kingdom.
Okay.
And him connecting to the heirs of Saul is vitally important to do that.
Okay. So John takes a little angle than I was on, that this kingdom is totally divided now. You got the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes that were Saul, and you got the other 2 that were following David, and a play to get this kingdom united is part of what John points out, that it may be part of what David's trying to accomplish here. We know for sure also that he made a promise, he made a covenant with Jonathan that was what? What was the covenant that he made?
Family.
Let's look at, how about 1 Samuel 20, and kind of remember this. Remember the friendship, the really intimate friendship that David and Jonathan had. 1 Samuel 20, verses 14 through 16, help us kind of remember that. We've read this before. This is when Jonathan and David they're trying to figure out if Saul's really going to kill him or not. But they get down into verse 14 as part of this agreement. And you shall not only show me the kindness of the Lord while I still live, that I may not die, but you shall not cut off your kindness from my house forever. No, not when the Lord has cut off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, let the Lord require it at the hand of David's enemies. So in verse 15 there, it points out that they made a covenant that David and Jonathan, or when David was king, he would not cut off his kindness from the house of Jonathan forever. So I think that plays in this too. John's point certainly true, and probably may be a bigger part of it than even I had in my head. But the friendship and the covenant that Jonathan and David had also, I think, plays a part in this. And David, and as we see in the first 4 verses, is there anyone left? And do we know of anybody left of the lineage of Saul that I can show kindness to? And for both of those reasons, I think. And this Ziba, what was his role? What was Ziba's role? He was a servant of Saul. And he said, yeah, David, I know somebody. I know there's a person left of Saul's lineage, and his name is, yes, his name is Mephibosheth, and I know where he's at. So David went and got him. And as we read in verse 6, and when Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, had come to Damascus, he fell on his face and prostrated himself. Then David said, Mephibosheth, and he answered, here is your servant. So David goes and gets Mephibosheth and brings him to Jerusalem. And so how do you guess Mephibosheth is reacting to this? Think he's happy to go? You think he's anxious, scared? What do you think his attitude would be? Okay, verse 7 says that, do not fear, for I will surely show you kindness for Jonathan, your father's sake. So certainly he was fearful. He's been hiding. How long has he been hiding? I didn't talk about that. How long do we think he's been? How old was he when he became lame?
5.
How did he become lame?
The nurse dropped him.
A nurse dropped him. We ain't nurses in here. No. It says a nurse dropped him. I don't really understand how that can make you lame.
She was in a hurry.
I understand she was in a hurry, but I still don't know how that makes you lame. But it's what the word says. The nurse dropped him. He was lame. He was 5 years old. So how old do you think he is here now?
Got a kid.
Yeah,
He's got a kid. He has a son.
yeah.
We know that. So we
So if he's 20, it's been 15 years.
okay.
I mean, I think that's probably the low end.
Oh, about 20.
So I've seen things that say about 15 years. Somebody may, John, you want to correct me on that?
I don't think it's clear. He's old enough to be a father. That's about it.
Yeah.
But I think too, just to make a note that he's the legitimate heir to the throne. He is the only one who can challenge David.
Okay.
And although David demonstrates that, I mean, the text does not kind of paint the subtext of there being a divine power, but
Right.
he is the only one who can challenge David to the throne.
Okay. So John's point, he is really and truly the only heir to the throne remaining. And he could challenge David's kingship for sure. And even in the shape he was in, he still certainly could challenge David's kingship. And so when David calls for him, and he has been perhaps hiding, he's been in a remote spot, Lodabar for 15 years. David sends his men come knocking at the door. I really don't know how he reacted, except I would guess that he was fearful. He would have had to be somewhat fearful. I've been kind of laying low for 15 years, and now they found me, and I'm not sure how this is going to work out.
So just a few years later, in 2 Samuel 21, I mean, there were a few other descendants of Saul lingering around.
Okay?
A few years later, in 2 Samuel 21, the Gibeonites get a hold of him and kill them all. And David facilitates that. So it's not like time necessarily makes all this go away. I'm confident he was terrified. He had reason to be. You know, there's a lot of people that would have potentially been wanting to take vengeance on him.
Okay. So Michael pointed out that later there were some other of Saul's descendants that are murdered, and David was kind of in the middle of that. And so he had a reason to fear. He had a reason to fear. And they show up and they take him into Jerusalem, and he bows down in front of David. And what does he call himself? Your servant. And then what in verse 8? Somebody read verse 8. Yeah, he bowed himself. What is your servant that you should look upon him as look upon such a dead dog as I? He calls himself a dead dog. Somebody help me with that. Is that something he's proud of? What does he mean by a dead dog as I? Okay, I think that's it. He's unworthy. I am, in your eyes, David, I'm nothing. He calls himself a dead dog and says, what do you want with me? Well, how can I help you? What do you want with me? Still, I don't think he understands that David is not, well, David's told him, he said, don't fear. I am not going to harm you. I'm going to show you kindness for Jonathan, your father's sake. And not only that, this next part is very important. And will restore to you all the land of Saul, your grandfather, and you shall eat bread at my table continually. So not only does he say, I'm not going to kill you, but I am going to give you what? I'm going to give you all of Saul's property that he had. And I'm assuming that was a lot of property. And not only that, but you are going to get to eat in the palace with me from now on, which would have been a very, very, very big deal. And because he certainly was not expecting anything like that. And now he's given this great mercy, this great grace that David gives to him. So, any questions, thoughts on any of that?
The commentary I read pointed out that Jesus told the disciples this in Luke 22:30, that you will dine at my table in heaven forever. We sometimes see Jesus through David.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Carroll says sometimes we see the parallels between Jesus and David's life, and she noted Luke 22:30. Luke 22:30, which says, what does it say? I'm in 21. Somebody want to read Luke 22:30 for me?
That you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and sit on the thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel.
And so the point that Carol was making was that as Christians, we have in the new covenant that we may eat and drink at my table in the kingdom. Parallel between what Jonathan has just told Mephibosheth and what Christians have the ability to understand today. While we're there in Luke 22, talking about these covenants, because I think that's a part of this covenant that David and Jonathan had, and how that parallels with us today. If you look at, and we talk about these verses a lot, but Luke 22:19 and 20. Luke 22:19 and 20. Jeff, will you read those?
And he took bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and gave it to them, saying, This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Likewise, he also took the cup of supper, saying, This cup is the new covenant of my blood, which is shed for you.
So there we see the word new covenant. As Christians, when we remember the sacrifice of Christ, it says this is part of the new covenant. We read in Hebrews 7:22 that we are talking about this covenant relationship we have, that we are part of a better covenant. Kyle has taught a lot of talk about the covenants, and so we've been through this in the past. Yes, sir.
I was just going to say, I do think that covenant aspect is a big part of this. And to Carol's point earlier, David is a shadow or a type of Jesus. And so when you kind of step back and look at this from a little bit greater standpoint, chapter 8 is all about
compared to these others, he can do nothing. And yet, David brings him into his home, allows him to dine with him, says, "You will be in my house forever." And it's very reflective of Jesus. We are his enemies. We can't do anything to him. We have no real power to defeat him and should just be squashed. But yet he invites us into his house forever to dine with him. So I think it's really interesting to step back and see that picture of the battles going on. Chapter 10 is also about those battles.
Yeah, the battles begin, they renew themselves, yes.
Yeah, so just sandwiched in between all of this war is this meal. And I just think it's...
Yeah. As I'm thumbing through here, we talk about the wars, then we talk about this graciousness of David here, and then we get to chapter 12 or 11, and we get the adultery with Bathsheba. I mean, he is a like all of us. He is a flawed character. He has his difficulties for sure, but yeah. So that's why it makes this interesting, because he's a lot like us. We all have faults, and but we have to overcome them. David sure did. Any other comments, thoughts?
All of these pieces of the puzzle that we see in 2 Samuel, you see, of course, the graciousness of David, but you see him making steps to consolidate the country in order for Solomon to accomplish what he does. Because Solomon would have never accomplished what he accomplished had it not been for these steps that David makes to unite the kingdom. I mean, that can't be overstated. He's going to move the capital from Hebron
Okay.
to Jerusalem, which is in the central part of the country from down south. He's going to, when Abner's assassinated, he's going to publicly mourn his death, because Abner had become really the face and voice of the northern tribes after the death of Ishbosheth. So he's making all these moves that are very political in nature, that have spiritual overtones, but they are very political to unite these tribes. That is central to God's plan.
Okay. Okay. Good point. Thank you. So Jonathan, John, if you didn't hear him, said that Solomon would never have had the ability to build the temple with all the furnishings that he had if David had not got things ready for him. That if he hadn't have did all these things and brought all this together so that Solomon could build the temple as he did and have the kingdom united, it would not have been without the work of David. So there is certainly political overtones to this getting Mephibosheth on board as well.
I like that in the previous chapter, David wanted to do something for God, and then in this chapter, he wants to do something for people, another person.
Okay, Ms. Carroll said in chapter 8, David wanted to do something for God. In chapter 9, he wanted to do something for a person. So that was her thought on that. Okay, so let's, yes?
Just before we go on, kind of not really connected in a terrible way to this conversation, but it is interesting that both Mephibosheth and Ishbosheth, whose names mean, their names are shameful. They
Yeah.
point to,
That Bosheth must be shamed
yes, and
because we got Ish and
both of their names are actually changed.
Okay,
Is likely in 1 Chronicles 9, they have alternate names given. The sons of Saul being Jonathan and Abinadab, Malchishua, and Eshbaal, and that's Ishbosheth's alternate name, Eshbaal. And Jonathan's son Mephibosheth is also mentioned there, named Meribbaal. And it makes you wonder why in this lineage of kings and sons of kings, you have children whose names reflect foreign gods, and potentially why their names were changed to reflect that idea of shame, that maybe as these, as the accounts that are being recorded for the children of Israel to remember how we got to where we are, we're ashamed of the names. We won't even maybe pronounce them anymore.
okay.
But just makes you curious. It's curious as to why a king like Saul, who does tend to put his own desires before God, but
Yeah, the idolatrous gods of the Canaanites, those Baals, yeah, and why they would name their sons after them was certainly an interesting thing.
It was probably fad at the time.
The fad, yeah,
Just like we use names today, that, I mean, it's just probably popular.
yeah,
But yeah, great point, Al. Those names certainly draw, I mean, it certainly questions the spirituality of Saul. I mean, I think we put noted before, there's no evidence whatsoever that he even lived in tabernacle, that he was even a religious guy.
okay,
His son was okay, but we don't know anything about his other sons.
okay.
But, yeah.
Yeah, point was made that of Saul, if you didn't hear him, we never hear of him being a religious guy at all. So when you talk about Saul, you're talking about somebody he is not a good person, and we see from his account that we've talked about already, how he got down, he was insane, put it lightly. So I think we've answered a lot of these questions, but we'll, let's see, I know we've answered one, and we've answered number two. No, we didn't. Do you think it was wise for Ziba to tell David where Mephibosheth was located? 2 Samuel 9, 1 through 4. Was that a wise thing to do?
He benefited from it.
Who did?
Ziba?
Ziba did, yeah. Ziba is not talked about in this lesson, but how does what do we think about Ziba? You may know anything about Ziba?
He turns out not to be a very, what's the right word? His character is questionable.
Okay, Ziba turns out to be a very questionable character, very he was very deceitful, I think, sly. I mean, why do I say that? Why do I say that? Somebody get to the punchline here. What's the end of this? What happens?
So chapter 16, David's on the run at that point, and Ziba lies and says, yeah, Mephibosheth kind of hopes you're on the run, and he thinks that his family will take the throne again, which was a lie. And so David kind of, what's the right word? Kind of knee-jerk reaction to that, said, well, you can just have all his stuff, basically. So he gave all of Mephibosheth's possessions to Ziba.
Yeah, so he was very deceitful in that. But the end of the story is that they end up splitting it up.
Yeah.
They come back and David says, okay, I may have been misled here. What do y'all want to do? And David says, y'all can split up the land. And what does Mephibosheth say to that? Let him have it all. I want you to be the king. I want you to be the king here in Jerusalem. If he wants to be that way, I guess just let him be that way. Which is very, Mephibosheth, yeah, good guy, I think. He was one of the good guys. So sorry, I don't know how we got down the road that far, but
He's also one of the guys that survives. There's not many that actually survive.
okay.
Left family. After his kiddo, Ishbosheth's kiddo, he's assassinated. It's definitely precarious.
Yep. Yeah, he is one of the survivors for sure. Number 3, when Mephibosheth comes to David, what does he think will very possibly happen? And we kind of talked about that. He thinks what might happen to him? He thinks that David may be bringing him in to assassinate him. And David calms his fears and says, that is not, I'm here to, do not be afraid. I'm here to help you. The 4th question, how does Mephibosheth feel about David's kindness? He feels like he's unworthy. He calls himself a dog. He said, I am unworthy. And then how does David also ensure Mephibosheth's servants keep their jobs?
He returned all of Saul's holdings.
He returned all of Saul's land to him. And who did he put in charge of that land? He put Ziba in charge. And now he's in charge of all this land. And Mephibosheth gets to reap some of the fruits of it, but he also gets to dine with David and all those others that perhaps are there with David. So Mephibosheth ends up in very, very good shape, I think. Number 5, Jonathan's son is described as lame in both his feet, but David sustains him. How does this picture remind you of what God does for us through Jesus? And there's several verses there to look at. Let's look at Romans 5, 6 through 8. How does this remind us of what God does for us? Which I think is the point of the lesson. Romans 5, 6 through 8. Mr. Bridgman?
For while we were still helpless, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. For one will hardly die for a righteous man, though for perhaps the good man, someone would dare even to die. But God demonstrates his own love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us.
While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. He has certainly been gracious and merciful to us, and as David was to Mephibosheth. And I think that's a great comparison there. Also, Mark 2, verses 5 and 9. Mark 2, verses 5 and 9. Tim, you got those? Just read through 5 through 9. Yeah.
When Jesus saw her faith, he said to the paralytic, Son, your sins are forgiven you. Some of the scribes were sitting there and reasoning in their hearts, why does this man speak blasphemies like this? Who can forgive sins but God alone? And immediately when Jesus perceived in his spirit that they reasoned thus within themselves, he said to them, Why do you reason about these things in your hearts? Which is easier, to say to the paralytic, Your sins are forgiven? Your sins are forgiven you, or to say, Arise, take up your bed and walk.
So we certainly see that Jesus had the ability to forgive sins, and as he did here with the paralytic man, he healed him, and it says also that he forgave him. So I think, again, tying to the Mephibosheth and David, the grace and mercy that was offered there. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us, and I think that is certainly a good comparison there. Any other thoughts, comments on anything we've talked about or missed?
Mickey, I think one of the things that we talked about in the last talks that you see fulfillment, or the fulfillment of is the Davidic covenant that God makes with David. And that in order for that covenant to be fulfilled, all of these things have to happen.
Okay.
God's going to bless David in his kingship, and he's going to see that the nation's united, but he's also going to see that through his seed, that there's going to become this eternal kingdom. And I think that these events that we see take place are God's fulfilling his covenant with David.
Okay. Very good. Thanks, John. So John's comment was that we see through all this, as obscure as this story seems to be, we see all of this as a fulfillment of the promises that God had made to David, that through his seed, and that the world would be blessed. And we know that is talking about Christ, and when Christ came and fulfilled these prophecies. But without all these stories that we have, how God lays this out and how this comes about, it's just mind-boggling, the things that God has prepared for us that to try to understand. Makes really, really good stuff. It says our author here says, God is a just God. He is fair. He's able to give us what we deserve, yet our God is also a God of mercy and grace. He sees our weaknesses and chooses to forgive anyway. We see a beautiful picture of the heart of God in the life of David in 2 Samuel 9. and how he deals with Saul's grandson, Mephibosheth, which is what we've been trying to lay out. We 1 Samuel 31:6, I think it mentions, as if somebody wanted to look there, what happened to Saul's other sons and what brought this all about. They died in battle, and at the same time, 3 sons and Saul dies at the same time. Is that the same battle? Okay, the Philistines took care of them all at the same time there in 1 Samuel 31. It says, however, Mephibosheth, Jonathan's son, was still alive. Yet instead of executing him, David goes above and beyond and chooses to show mercy, as described in 2 Samuel 9:3. This is a beautiful picture of mercy and of grace. And so we get down to the key lessons that Mr. Welch wants us to learn from this. And the first one is godly people keep their promises. If we are godly people, we will keep our promises, just as God did to Abraham and God did to David, and as David did to Jonathan. Godly people keep their promises. I think that should be true of all Christians. Second one was, a man after God's own heart is merciful, gracious, and forgiving. And hope that all of us, men and women, can have that kind of heart that is merciful or gracious and forgiving. Certainly David was in this story. And then King David offered mercy to Mephibosheth for the sake of his covenant with Jonathan. God is gracious to us for the sake of our covenant through the blood of King Jesus. And we looked at Luke 22:30 that lays that out. Also Ezekiel 36, we didn't go there. Let's look at Ezekiel 36. Kyle, your Ezekiel 36, 26 and 27, talking about this new covenant.
Moreover, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. And I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will be careful to observe my ordinances.
So, aspects of the new covenant, I think, here that Ezekiel is prophesying about. Talks about a new heart and a new spirit. And certainly we know in Christ we have this relationship. If we're the kind of person that we should be, we have this different heart and a different spirit, and the Holy Spirit dwells in us, and we truly are holy and righteous. So I think that is certainly a definition of a covenant, of a new covenant that we now have. Any comments, thoughts, anything on Mephibosheth that we need to? Yes, sir.
This characteristic of showing mercy to your enemies, we see that again in another godly man in 2 Kings 6 with Elisha. And you have the Aramean nation warring with Israel, and God interacts, he intervenes there and strikes them all with blindness, and they all wind up strolling into the kingdom of Israel, strolling right into the forces of Israel. And the question in verse 21, the king of Israel asks Elisha, "My father, shall I kill them? Shall I kill them?" The answer is, "You shall not kill them. Would you kill those you have taken captive with your sword, with your bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master." So he prepared a great feast for them. And when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away, and they went to their master. And the marauding bands of the Arameans did not come again into the land of Israel. It's just interesting how similar that is. You have someone who is an enemy, someone who has been defeated by God, and the response is, we're going to make a feast for them.
Okay. Good point. Thank you. Okay?
Interesting
Huh.
turn of events from a son whose name reflects my my advocate is Baal, a son who is like Yahweh.
It can get really confusing because Saul had a son named Mephibosheth as well. So, I know that's a lot. That's a lot to take in. 2 Mephibosheths in one chapter is a lot. Well, so we'll look forward to Luke leading us through Bathsheba on Sunday, and then Uriah. So that'll be good, two in a row. So thank you all very much. Sorry I ended too soon, but I ran out of stuff. Mephibosheth.